I started with the series, but I was not in either pilot.
And for myself, I was called one day to read for Star Trek, and because I do a lot of accents, they said, please do a lot of accents. So I read the same lines, about 5 or 6 lines, and I did about 5 different accents. And they picked the Scottish.
You do accents, right.
Yeah. So they picked the Scottish. And of course, I was delighted with that because I think that the tradition of an engineer is a Scotsman, you know, because all the great motor ships and the steamships of the world were built in the Clyde. So we just had to have a Scottish engineer aboard that, you know. But 300 years from now, of course, you had to go back and learn the Scottish accent all over again because everybody's conversation was exactly the same and everybody was so boring because of the great communication. Everybody talked the same. We had to go back and even had to learn to speak Swahili, you understand?
Yes. Now, you were the Russian, and that came later, as I said in introducing you, the last 2 years. How come?
Well, let me say, first of all, that if Dee came in the back door, I came in the trap door. It was a very fortuitous circumstance where several of the people involved in the production of the show, casting director, and producer, had used me before. I had worked for them in other vehicles. And I was asked to come in and read for a part that had not yet been written. And it was a show called The Cat's Paw, and the character's name was Blake or Smith or Epstein or something like that. In any event, it was a very dramatic moment, a very dramatic scene where I was supposed to say, kid, about to blow up, what are we going to do? And I read that with all of that emotion, you know, and all those years of training, experience, my little theater experience, my off-Broadway. And they said, well, that's terrific. But they all kind of looked at their toes, and they finally said, but can you make it funny?
And if you'd have done 21-liners that were dynamite, they would have said, hey, would you make it not quite so funny? Just a little test of versatility there.
You've been around quite a long while. You know all the ins and outs of this business.
It's a funny thing about auditions. You have to be better for auditions than you ever have to be once you're hired. That is the most critical thing in the world, is getting the job.
Right.
Now, in the little film we played here at the beginning where it said the mission is 5 years to go around the universe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The show did not last 5 years, did it? It lasted what?
3. Yeah, 3 years, 79 performances, which includes pilots, and also the making of a 2-parter, which included the very first pilot, and they wrote a story around it to make a 2-parter, and the only 2-parter we had, and that was called The Menagerie, and it included the first pilot, which was called The Cage, and the second pilot was called Where No Man Has Ever Gone Before.
For